Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Chicago loves you, as you can tell.
We
love Chicago.
We love Chicago. And we love you.
Thank you very much. It's very sweet. Love you guys as well. Let's get right into it here. Let's
All right.
talk about this film. We were just talking as you guys were enjoying the last very powerful few minutes of the film about the epic struggle. The making of Gotti could also be a movie.
We worked on this movie for 7 years to get it done, because it's difficult nowadays to get this kind of human story out there, financed, directed, produced, released. That's the hardest part, getting it released. But we ended up succeeding through many casts, many directors, many script rewrites, and we finally felt we got it right, and the Gotti family felt we got it right, which is very important.
Which is a huge relief.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, this is based on a book by John Jr., right? So obviously, you were working closely with him throughout this process.
Correct. Well, the interesting part was that the family had approval who would play the parts in the film, and I was their first choice to play John Sr., which was very interesting. I thought, why me? You know, what did I do?
What are you trying to say?
What am I trying to say? So I was flattered by that, to say the least. But then they really supported us in giving us all the tools to create our characters. They gave us footage. They gave us family home films. They allowed us to wear the clothes that John wore and Victoria wore, the jewelry, to make us feel that we were part of the creation of what would be accurate, you know. So it was a beautiful support system. I got to spend a lot of time with John Jr. I went to explore all the neighborhoods and boroughs of New York where he did business, and I found out some very interesting things, because I didn't understand why he was so loved. And then after interviewing different venues, different businesses, I found one of the big reasons was that he would take any business that was in the red and put them in the black, so nobody ever went out of business. So he was kind of an insurance policy, which I didn't know. And then also he financed all these very big parties for the community, or if a family wasn't doing well, he would help them out, or if a gym was closed down, like the one scene where the boxer gave up, he would reopen the gym for them. So he was kind of, because I didn't remember Capone or Dillinger being loved, and I thought, why is he loved? So I guess that was part of it. Do you know?
He was a people person.
It's true. But for those of you that don't know, like for example, you see that fireworks scene, you think, oh, that might be dramatic license. That's based on absolute fact. For 20 years he did that.
And every single aspect of this film was literally verbatim. There's not one word in this film that wasn't actually taken from an experience that the Gottis had. And Kelly had a wonderful time with Mrs. Gotti, Victoria, because she had the luxury of spending a lot of time with her, and she informed both of us of that.
We went to her house, and she invited us over, cooked us an amazing meal, and all of the family were coming in and out, and we could ask her anything. So I became email buddies with her, and could ask her, how are you feeling during this moment, or what did you really say during this, or is this okay if I say this? And she's amazing. She's wickedly smart and funny, and very down to earth, very straightforward, a tough cookie. But it helped me so much. Not only, she gave me a wedding ring, she gave me a ring that John had given her, she'd never taken off until she gave it to me to wear in the movie. And as an actor, I don't know if there are any actors in here, it's so valuable to have the support. She was really happy I was playing her. And the family, of course, chose John. So to have that support is just unparalleled.
And John Jr., by the way, was on the set every day. Talk about pressure.
Every day. Every day.
My father would do it this way, and I liked it. I was challenged by his presence, I think, as was Kelly. But everyone in their family had a different viewpoint or story about how it happened, how it went down, so on and so forth. So you had to ascertain for yourself and gather enough knowledge and make your own judgment of how to portray it based on many viewpoints. and say, I think, okay, this is probably the truth of how we should play this.
Yeah.
And that was interesting and fun, too.
That's really cool. And I'm sure, you've acted together before, and I'm sure there are a lot of projects that comes your way. But I think one of the reasons that people admire you two so much is you always put family first. You've always been that way. So I'm sure you're picking and choosing roles. How did you decide, Kelly, okay, I'm going to play Victoria here? When did that come about?
I think because it was such a brilliant, I thought, you have to do this movie. It was such an iconic person in our history, John Gotti, and for John Travolta to play John Gotti, I thought was really interesting, and I knew he would just blow it out of the water because I'm married to the best actor in the world. You're welcome. But so to play Victoria was a big honor to me, and I love playing characters. And just with the depth of what happened in their lives, not knowing anything behind the headlines. It was fascinating growing up John Gotti, but I didn't know any of these things that went on behind the scenes, what a family man he was, their relationship, and I found that really interesting and great to play. Also,
when it's tricky when you're married and you're going to work together because I think there's sensitivities toward it, but if you would be cast in those roles anyway, then there's not that sensitivity. If you go back to Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, they were together, but they would have been cast in Virginia Woolf whether they were separate or individual. So you have to really have integrity about, is this the project that you take advantage of being together and have the power to do so. That's when you decide to do it, when it has authenticity, Yeah.
Well, I think it's, and forgive me for this, but there's a lot of bravery too, because of course, this mother and father experienced the worst loss imaginable as you did. And first of all, it was just, heartbreakingly effective performances by both of you, but that's got to be something that you're thinking about as you're playing those scenes as well, I would imagine.
Well, it's interesting because it can't help but to inform, but on the other hand, I've always tried to separate my personal life from my professional life. So I try to more so become the character's reaction to loss, or what would they do? How would they think? And for instance, John Jr. said, when I heard my father cry, sob over his son's death, he did it privately, and I heard it through the radiator, he said. And it broke his heart because he daren't show anyone that vulnerability. So he had to do it in private, as did Victoria, was in her room, but everyone overheard it. So it was helpful for them to tell us how their parents responded to it. It's tricky to cross-collateralize on emotion like that,
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I think for me it was hard to navigate, to not go there. So I would try to keep it separate, but
it always informs to some
degree,
and especially feeling the same depth of tragedy.
And this, I feel like this is, really two films, because we have, the crime story, and we'll talk a little bit about some of your associates and the great actors who played them, but then there's also the domestic drama, kind of Sopranos-esque or Goodfellas-esque, where Victoria is really the heart and soul. Because I just want to talk, if you can talk a little bit about that, because your character, Victoria, she knows who her husband is, but she's all about family. That's what's most important to her, protecting the family.
And still is. That's exactly. And she told me that when he would go out that door, it was a different life. And once he came home, she never asked him about it. They never spoke about it. Of course, she had to. I didn't get into too in-depth because I didn't want to judge her. And I knew in my own mind how she must be dealing with this and sort of compartmentalizing what her husband was doing out there. But she said, I never asked. We never spoke about it. He was the family man. He was my husband. They were passionately in love. They loved their children. And interesting, she told me, John was amazed that men feared him. They, you know, of course he was John Gotti. He couldn't understand why his wife had no fear for him. It would drive him crazy sometimes. And
But they
would
did
get
know
into
each
these,
other earlier than the
yes,
mob, so that
but they would get
the
into
blueprint
these
for each other's
tussles,
person.
and she would stand up for herself. And she told me many details and many things, and she'd make me laugh. It's like she would stand toe to toe with him, and then of course they'd make up, and it was like, "I love you," you know, and it would be all fine.
And it's fun. It's got to be fun for you to play as well, because I mean, to put on that wig and to use that language.
That was
and
my
to,
hair. I dyed.
That
my
was your hair.
Yeah,
Look at that.
I
Yeah.
went
Method
there
hair. You had
before
method hair. Okay.
But they
my
did
hair.
know each other prior to the mob, so you know the original blueprint of each other. So all that power that's given to you through the criminal life is to some degree an illusion too. So I figured they could go toe to toe because they trusted each other's basic personality, and the other to some degree could be show as well. You know?
And the transformation, and you know, I think the makeup people deserve a lot of credit as well.
Oh,
They're
yes.
incredible. But I actually sent a little. I hope I don't get arrested for this. Just a teeny screen grab of one little moment where the beginning of the film, and I sent it to a couple of friends, and I said, "Who do you think this is?" And someone said, "Wow, Alan Arkin is looking pretty good." And then someone else said, "Is that Bruce Willis?" Who I think you might have met and worked with a little bit. So the physical transformation is amazing. But I also want to talk to you about playing this character, because you know we never lose sight of the fact that this man is a ruthless killer. This man will do anything, and yet you have to play him as someone that you have to find something empathetic in him, but while never losing sight of that. This is not glorifying the life or his action.
Well, you know, there's a few answers to that. One, it's hard to say the film is glorifying it when this guy has stage 4 cancer in prison, and look at the end result, you know, and the RICO Act comes in, and criminals are protected. They could have murdered 26 people, but because they, you know, squealed, they were protected. And then the mob, as the mob knew it, the La Cosa Nostra, the integrity, the loyalty, the honor disappeared. So, you know, that's a group that has their own moral code, and they are violent with each other based on an agreement to be violent with each other. It's not your average citizen they're being violent with. They're being violent upon agreement. So there's that side of it too. And also everybody has parts of them that are human beings and feel as deeply as they allow themselves to feel. And I think Gotti had a deep feeling about his family, and certainly his son had a tremendous opinion and depth about the way he felt about his boy. And you know, that's my global take on it to some degree.
Can I add one thing too? I think it's also not really glorifying it when it comes directly from John Jr.'s book.
Right.
And all of these are true incidents. You're almost getting to see what happened in life presented in a cinematic form. You know,
It's a
presented in a
historical
way,
event.
but it's a historic, it's almost a documentary, because you're getting to see behind the scenes while all of this is happening. Nothing was embellished in the movie.
Yeah, and those end clips of the people feeling that he was a hero, those are actual clips. So we're not saying anything that's not you know, true, you know, for that group of people that felt that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, this is it has kind of a docudrama feel, especially in some of those scenes. Talk a little bit about the director, who people also might know as an actor, who's helming this
Kevin
film,
Connolly. Yeah, he was lovely because he was obsessed with the mob. He knew so much about the history of the mob and the Gotti and Gambino family and I had to remind him. I said, you know, Kevin, not everybody is as learned as you are. We have to, in this film, articulate dates and people and who they are and why they are. And if we don't, we're going to lose them, because not everybody knows as much about the mob as you do. So I said, I would like to make sure that we design a film that informs, so it's not that it's a lesson, but that you could follow it. You know who Sammy the Bull is, and you know who these different characters, what they mean, and the dates that they are correlated to.
Yeah, and I think it does a great job of laying that out. And the music as well, I think, is really important
Yeah,
here.
my buddy Pitbull.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
He's,
Fantastic.
oh
Oh
my
my
God.
God. Brilliant, right?
Yes, he and his team where's Phil?
Phil's right there.
Phil
Phil's
Glasser, our
dad,
producer, his dad helped with the score as well.
Richard.
And they together really created a beautiful soundtrack for this film. And Amore is the one that Pitbull wrote, the opening and closing song. And that goes out next week. And I have pride in music with film because a lot of my history is connected with that combination. So I'm very,
Have you ever thought about dancing on screen maybe at any point? Maybe not
I
a
never
show.
thought about that.
I think he'd be amazing.
I'll give it a try.
What the heck?
And how about the character kind of breaking that fourth wall? Is that fun for you? Like where you're talking to us almost from beyond the grave
That was
at the beginning?
Kevin's
Yeah.
idea. He said, I would love to open and close. He said, remember the film Alfie? And he said, you know how it opened and you break the wall and talk. And I said, film it. I'll try it and let's see if it works. And I think as bookends, it kind of worked well. So, yeah.
And you both talked about playing, characters who, yes, some people need to learn the whole story, but real life characters. How close do you go to? It's never going to be an impersonation, but how do you do that? How do you balance between your creation of the character and what you know about? Because there's a lot of video of John Gotti.
Well, it's tricky for someone like me, only because I'm so familiar to the public that I feel it's more like I did with Robert Shapiro in the O.J. Simpson story.
Yeah.
Also won the Emmy as a producer of that, by the way.
Thank you. Because I'm so familiar, it's more important that I disappear more deeply than another actor would. Another actor might have the license to be more of themselves. I don't have that license. So I feel it's a specific situation of mine to disappear completely or as much as I can, because otherwise I can't invite you into telling that story. So I go out of my way to really try to become that character because I know how familiar I am to people. And when they're as specific as Gotti or as specific as Shapiro, you can do that more easily because they have such drastic attributes. So it's a little bit easier when they're bigger than life, like both those characters are.
Is that, Kelly, for you too? I mean, you're 27 now, of course, as everybody knows. It looks
Thank
exactly
you,
the same.
Richard.
But both of you have been in so many iconic roles, and so familiar to the public, and so beloved, I think, by film audiences. As an actor, is that a different kind of challenge? So like, okay, they know me, they know my face, they know other roles I've played. To kind of disappear into a role, does that become a bigger challenge as time goes by?
I think with this one, especially for me, only because she's still living and because she's known. Of course, it was John Gotti who was so iconic and in all the papers, but there is some footage of her online, and she has different things. She was famous for the outbursts in the courtroom or different things like that, or being caught by more paparazzi than anything else. But in that made it a little more of a challenge because she's well known and she's still around.
Absolutely wonderful stuff. I have to ask John one question before we let these folks go and thank them for giving us their time. I just recently heard this theory about Grease, which I think you've heard as well, that Sandy's in a coma. And I have to ask this because, of course, Grease started in Chicago as a basement play, the two writers. And now, if you guys haven't heard this, there's a theory running wild that Olivia Newton-John Sandy's in a coma the whole time, and that's why the car flies off into the sky at the end, and it's just her coma dream. Your comments, sir?
Well, listen, I just feel very fortunate that I've been part of several films that have this mystery about them. In Pulp Fiction, it was the briefcase. And what's in the briefcase and what's in the back of Ving Rhames' head, and all that stuff. So I think whenever a film grows to that kind of imagination, I think you just go with it. So, you know, if they want to think Olivia's this and me and I'm that in the car means something, I'm all for significances on that.
What's in the briefcase? Are you kidding me? Come on, sir. Oh, and I have to say one last quick Chicago anecdote. For people who don't know this, the late, great Gene Siskel purchased the white suit from Saturday Night Fever for $2,000, right? And I think you signed the lining on the inside.
I did. Then he sold it to Jane Fonda for $140,000.
Yes.
And then Jane Fonda sold it to someone for $250,000. So it keeps on going up, but I don't own it anymore.
No.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
Gene Siskel said he bought a cottage in Wisconsin with the money.
Yeah, he called it the Tony Manero Scholarship Fund for his children as well, so thank you for that. Well, listen, I'm glad you guys all enjoyed the film. Tell everybody about Gotti, and thank you once again to John.
Thank you guys so much.